The smell hit the hostess first. Not offensive, just different. A mixture of old wool and something she couldn't place. She looked up from her reservation book to see an elderly man approaching her podium, moving slowly with the aid of a worn wooden cane. The restaurant was packed with the evening crowd, every table filled with well-dressed customers enjoying their expensive meals. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're completely booked tonight," she said quickly, not even checking her book. "Maybe try the diner down the street." 78-year-old Colonel Samuel Hayes paused, confused. The restaurant clearly had several empty tables, and he could see the hostess hadn't even looked at her reservations. But he'd been through this before. At his age, wearing clothes that had seen better days, people made assumptions. He simply nodded and turned to leave. But manager Robert Chen had been watching from across the room. He approached the hostess with an expression of approval. "What was that about, Jessica?" "Just some homeless guy trying to get in," she whispered. "Did you smell him? This is a high-end establishment. We can't have people like that driving away our real customers." Chen glanced toward the door where the elderly man was slowly making his way out. "Good call. Our clientele expects a certain standard." What neither Chen nor Jessica knew was that 6 young men in civilian clothes had been sitting at the corner booth when the entire exchange took place. They weren't tourists or local business owners. They were United States Navy SEALs on shore leave, and they had witnessed every moment of what just happened. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez was the first to stand. At 35, he was the senior member of Team 6. With 7 deployments and a Silver Star earned in operations he couldn't discuss. His teammates followed his lead. Chief Petty Officer David Thompson, Petty Officer First Class James Wilson, Petty Officer Second Class Carlos Martinez, Petty Officer Second Class Kevin Chen, and Petty Officer Third Class Robert Washington. "Did you gentlemen see what I just saw?" Rodriguez asked quietly. An elderly veteran just got turned away from a restaurant because of how he looked, Thompson replied, his jaw tightening. In a restaurant with empty tables, Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. "Let's go talk to him." They found Colonel Hayes sitting on a weathered wooden bench outside the restaurant, beneath a streetlight that cast long shadows across the sidewalk. The disappointment was evident in his posture, shoulders slightly slumped, hands resting on his cane, eyes focused on the ground. There was no anger in his demeanor, no indignation or outrage, just quiet resignation, the look of someone who had experienced this kind of treatment before and had learned that fighting it usually made things worse. The evening air was cool and Hayes had pulled his old military jacket tighter around his shoulders. It was an Army-issue field jacket from the 1980s, worn but well-maintained, with faded name tapes and unit patches that told the story of a career spent in service to his country. To the restaurant staff, it had looked like the clothes of a homeless person. To anyone who understood military uniforms, it was clearly the jacket of someone who had served with distinction. "Sir," Rodriguez approached respectfully, recognizing immediately that this man's bearing and posture marked him as military even in civilian clothes. There was something in the way he sat, the straightness of his back despite his apparent disappointment, the precise way his hands rested on his cane. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice what happened in there. Are you military?" Hayes looked up, surprised to be approached by strangers, especially young men who clearly recognized something about him that the restaurant staff had missed entirely. His eyes, though tired, still held the alertness that came from decades of military service. "Yes, son." Army retired Colonel Samuel Hayes, 42 years of service. His voice carried the quiet dignity of someone who had led men in combat, who had made life-and-death decisions, and who had earned respect through actions rather than words. "What unit, sir?" Wilson asked, his tone respectful and genuinely interested. In military culture, asking about someone's unit was a way of establishing common ground, of showing respect for their service and understanding their background. 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, Vietnam, Panama, Desert Storm, 3 wars, more battles than I care to remember. Hayes paused, his eyes distant for a moment as memories flickered across his mind. "I just wanted a decent meal for my wedding anniversary." My wife Catherine passed 2 years ago, after 52 years of marriage, but I still take myself out on our special day. Seems silly, I suppose, but it helps me feel connected to her memory. The words hit the seals like a physical blow, each of them understanding immediately the depth of what they had witnessed. This wasn't just any elderly man being discriminated against based on age and appearance. This was a combat veteran, a leader who had served his country through multiple conflicts, someone who was quietly honoring his deceased wife's memory on what should have been a celebration of their love. He had been turned away from a restaurant while trying to commemorate the most important relationship of his life. Chen stepped forward, his expression softening with the kind of respect that one warrior shows to another, recognizing the quiet strength and dignity that marked Hayes as someone who had served with honor. "Sir, I'm sorry that happened to you in there. What you experienced was completely unacceptable, and I want you to know that not everyone in this city feels that way about our veterans." "It's all right, son," Hayes replied, though his voice carried the weight of disappointment. "I'm used to it. People see an old man with worn clothes and they make assumptions about who I am, what I'm capable of, whether I belong in their establishment. I understand their position, even if I don't agree with it. Sir, what decorations did you earn during your service?" Martinez asked respectfully. Hayes hesitated. After 4 decades of military service, he'd learned that talking about his awards often made people uncomfortable or skeptical. The usual: Combat Infantry Badge, Purple Heart for wounds in Vietnam, Bronze Star, he paused, and the Distinguished Service Cross for actions during Desert Storm. Rodriguez's expression immediately shifted to one of profound respect. The Distinguished Service Cross was the second highest military decoration, awarded only for extraordinary heroism in combat. In his entire career, he'd only met 3 DSC recipients. "Sir, would you mind if we saw your citation?" Rodriguez asked. Hayes nodded and carefully pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket. Inside, folded carefully, was the official citation. Rodriguez read it with growing amazement. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez announced to his team, "Colonel Samuel Hayes, Distinguished Service Cross recipient. During Operation Desert Storm, then Major Hayes single-handedly destroyed 3 Iraqi tank positions while under heavy fire, saving his entire company and clearing the way for Allied forces to advance." The SEALs snapped to attention and rendered perfect salute. Hayes slowly stood and returned them with the precision that 42 years of service had ingrained in his muscle memory. "Sir," Washington said, "what just happened in that restaurant is completely unacceptable. We're going to fix this." "No need, son," Hayes replied quietly. "I'm used to it. People see an old man with worn clothes and they make assumptions. I understand their position." "With respect, sir," Thompson interjected, "we don't understand their position, and we're not going to let it stand." Rodriguez turned to his team. "Gentlemen, I think it's time we had a conversation with the management of this establishment." The 6 SEALs walked back into the restaurant with the coordinated precision that only came from years of training together. They moved with purpose, their bearing making it clear to everyone in the dining room that something significant was about to happen. Other diners began to take notice, conversations gradually quieting as the group approached the management station with obvious military bearing. Manager Chen looked up as they approached his station, immediately sensing the change in atmosphere. The restaurant's usual ambient noise had diminished as customers turned to watch the unfolding situation. "Can I help you, gentlemen? We'd like to speak with you about the elderly gentleman you just refused service to," Rodriguez said, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. The kind of voice that had commanded respect in combat zones around the world. Chen's expression shifted to one of annoyance, clearly irritated that his evening was being disrupted by what he assumed were friends of the unwanted customer. "Look, this is a high-end restaurant. We have standards to maintain. That man didn't meet our dress code, and frankly, he had an odor issue." Our other customers were already starting to notice. "What kind of standards?" Wilson asked, his tone deceptively calm. "The kind that keeps our real customers happy," Chen replied dismissively, gesturing around the dining room filled with well-dressed patrons. "We can't have homeless people wandering in here and driving away paying customers. This is a business, not a charity kitchen." If every vagrant in the city thinks they can just walk in here expecting service, we'd be bankrupt within a month. The hostess, Jessica, had approached to support her manager. Exactly. I could smell him from across the room. Our customers pay good money to dine in a pleasant atmosphere, not to be subjected to that kind of situation. Thompson's jaw tightened as he listened to the casual cruelty in their voices. These people had just dismissed a war hero, as if he were garbage, without knowing anything about his service, his sacrifice, or the price he'd paid for their freedom to run their business. Thompson stepped forward, pulling out his military ID, Officer First Class David Thompson, United States Navy SEALs. That homeless person you just insulted is Colonel Samuel Hayes, United States Army, Distinguished Service Cross recipient, veteran of 3 wars, and one of America's greatest heroes. The words hit Chen like a physical blow. The entire restaurant had gone quiet, with diners turning in their seats to watch the confrontation. Martinez continued, "Sir, that man served his country for 42 years. He risked his life in combat to protect the freedoms that allow you to run this business. And you turned him away because you didn't like how he looked." Chen's face went pale as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. "I didn't know. That's exactly the problem," Rodriguez interrupted. "You didn't know, but you made assumptions anyway. You saw an elderly man in worn clothes and decided he wasn't worthy of basic human dignity." By now, other customers were pulling out phones to record the confrontation. Several were openly shaking their heads in disgust at how the veteran had been treated. "Where is he now?" Washington. Outside on the bench, Chen stammered. "Here's what's going to happen," Rodriguez said, his voice taking on the tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You're going to personally go outside, apologize to Colonel Hayes, and invite him back in for dinner. The best table in the house, with complimentary service. However, of course, absolutely." And, Thompson added, "you and your staff are going to learn something about respect for those who serve." The 6 SEALs escorted Chen outside where Colonel Hayes was still sitting quietly on the bench. The manager approached hesitantly. "Sir," Chen began, his voice shaking, "I owe you a sincere apology. I was completely wrong to judge you based on your appearance. These gentlemen have educated me about your service record, and I'm deeply ashamed of how you were treated." Hayes looked up, surprised by the change in attitude. "Please," Chen continued, "would you honor us by being our guest for dinner tonight? The best table in the house, everything complimentary, and you'll never be turned away from this restaurant again." Hayes glanced at the 6 SEALs who had stood up for him, then back at the manager. "Son, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't need charity." "It's not charity, sir," Rodriguez interjected. "It's respect, something you should have received from the moment you walked in." Colonel Hayes nodded slowly. "In that case, I'd be honored." The procession back into the restaurant was unlike anything the other diners had ever witnessed. 6 elite Navy SEALs escorting a Distinguished Service Cross recipient to the best table in the house, with the manager personally pulling out his chair. As Hayes settled in, Rodriguez addressed the entire dining room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Colonel Samuel Hayes, United States Army, retired. This man served our country for 42 years. Earned the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat, and fought in 3 wars to protect the freedoms we all enjoy." The restaurant erupted in applause. Several customers stood up, and an elderly gentleman at a nearby table raised his glass in a toast. "To Colonel Hayes, and all who served." The entire restaurant joined in the toast, and Hayes felt tears in his eyes. In 42 years of military service and 16 years of retirement, he had never experienced such a spontaneous outpouring of gratitude and respect. Ari Hook. But this story was about to take an even more incredible turn. As Hayes enjoyed his meal, word of what had happened was spreading beyond the restaurant. Wilson had posted a video of the confrontation on social media, and it was going viral. Within an hour, the restaurant was receiving calls from local news stations, veteran organizations, and hundreds of supporters wanting to thank Colonel Hayes personally. Social media was exploding with shares and comments. Veteran respect and Colonel Hayes were trending on multiple platforms. Comments poured in from veterans across the country sharing their own experiences with discrimination and praising the SEALs for standing up for one of their own. The 6 SEALs took turns sitting with Hayes throughout the evening, sharing stories and listening to his experiences from Vietnam to Desert Storm. For Hayes, it was like being welcomed back into the military family he had missed since retirement. "Colonel," Martinez said, "what was it like serving during 3 different conflicts?" Hayes considered his words carefully. "Each war was different, son. Vietnam was brutal, fought in jungles where you couldn't see the enemy. Panama was swift and decisive. Desert Storm was technological warfare like nothing we'd seen before. But in every conflict, the one constant was the men beside you. That brotherhood never changes." Rodriguez nodded, understanding complete, "Sir. That brotherhood is why we couldn't stand by and watch what happened to you tonight. When one veteran is disrespected, we all feel it. You know," Hayes told Rodriguez as the evening wound down, "my wife always told me that good people would recognize good people. She said the uniform doesn't make the man, but the man makes the uniform honorable." Rodriguez nodded. "She sounds like a wise woman, sir." She was. 47 years of marriage, and she never complained once about the deployments, the long hours, or the danger. She just said she was proud to be married to a soldier. As the restaurant began to close, Manager Chen approached the table one final time. "Colonel Hayes, I want you to know that you have a standing invitation here. You'll never pay for a meal, and you'll always have the best service we can provide. What happened tonight was inexcusable, and I'm going to make sure my entire staff understands the importance of treating every customer with dignity, especially our veterans." The 6 SEALs escorted Hayes to his car, making sure he had all their contact information. "Sir," Washington said, "if you ever need anything at all, you call us. The Navy takes care of its own, and that includes Army heroes." Hayes shook each of their hands, his voice thick with emotion. "You boys reminded an old soldier that he still matters. That's worth more than any medal." Final rehook. The video went viral with over 8 million views in the first week. Within days, major news networks picked up the story. CNN, Fox News, and NBC ran segments about the incident, interviewing both the SEALs and Colonel Hayes. The restaurant found itself at the center of a national conversation about how veterans are treated in civilian society. Colonel Hayes became a symbol of the dignity all veterans deserve. The restaurant implemented comprehensive new training programs and became known as one of the most veteran-friendly establishments in the city. Hayes was invited to speak at military events, sharing his story and inspiring others to stand up for what's right. Letters poured in from veterans across the nation, thanking Hayes for bringing attention to veteran discrimination. Active duty personnel expressed support, and veteran advocacy groups used his story to push for better treatment of aging veterans. But most importantly, he never ate alone again. The 6 SEALs stayed in touch, often joining him for dinners. Other veterans reached out, and Hayes found himself part of a brotherhood he thought he'd lost when he retired. Hayes's photo was displayed near the restaurant's entrance with a plaque reading, "In honor of Colonel Samuel Hayes and all who served." The restaurant became a meeting place for veterans from different eras, creating lasting bonds between generations of warriors. The 6 Navy SEALs had taught everyone a valuable lesson that night. Respect isn't about appearances or assumptions. It's about recognizing the dignity in every person, especially those who have sacrificed so much for others. Colonel Hayes had served his country with distinction for 42 years. But on that evening, 6 young warriors had served him, defending his honor and reminding the world that heroes come in all ages and deserve respect throughout their entire lives. The bonds forged in military service create a family that transcends time, rank, and branch of service. That night, 6 Navy SEALs welcomed an Army colonel into their brotherhood, and in doing so, they honored every person who has ever worn the uniform in service to something greater than themselves. The restaurant's transformation became a model for businesses across the country. What had started as a single incident became a nationwide movement encouraging respect for veterans regardless of age or appearance. Other restaurants began implementing veteran recognition programs, inspired by Hayes's story. Hayes never ate alone again. The 6 SEALs stayed in touch, creating a brotherhood that extended across generations. His weekly veteran dinners became legendary in the community, bringing together warriors from different eras and conflicts. Vietnam veterans sat alongside Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, sharing stories and supporting each other. Months later, when Hayes spoke at Veterans Day ceremonies, he would tell audiences, 6 young warriors reminded an old soldier that he still mattered. They taught me that the brotherhood forged in military service doesn't end when you take off the uniform, it lasts a lifetime. They showed me that heroes stand together, regardless of age or the wars they fought. The story became legend in military circles, shared as an example of what it means to have each other's backs. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought with courage, conviction, and the willingness to stand up for what's right when others remain silent. If this story moved you, remember that there are veterans in your community who deserve recognition and respect. Hit subscribe for more stories that honor those who served, and share this reminder that real heroes never stop deserving our gratitude, no matter their age or circumstance.